Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Exade Replay, coming to you with the final episode of Kamen Rider Exade. Let's get right into it. So here we are, after several months, we're finally at the end of the journey. We're going to see how the Kamen Riders of the CR beat Kronos and actually get everything done. Now, some people have been talking about this episode since it's been a couple of days now, that the end of the series may not have the best resolution possible, but we'll go ahead and get into it. I do, of course, want to address I'm not at home right now. I'm actually out in California. I was out here this weekend for Japan World Heroes. There was a lot of Exade love this weekend, and of course I'm going to be showing a lot of that right now, so let's go ahead and talk about what happened in this final episode. So really, we only have the one and only fight this week, which was a pickup from last week's episode after already taking care of the Game Deus portion of Game Deus Kronos. Now, admittedly, we see that Palat has been taken off the field, and Emu should no longer have the ability to transform. Now, we know this can't possibly hold up because this is the last episode and we need to get into this. So we see that Kronos has tried to use Pause again against the other four Kamen Riders that are going to fight him, and then Emu seems to somehow break out of it. Now, when you're looking at this, there's no logical reason why this should happen. Emu just kind of tells him to shut up, punches him in the belt, and that undoes the pause. The reason for this being, it looks cool, and I'm not going to overthink it beyond that. That's just what it has to be, because this is the last episode and we have to beat the bad guy. And really, the bulk of this is to go ahead and tie back to the imagery that we get in the first episode of the series, tying back to seeing Brave, Laser, Snipe, and Exade all together on the field at once to go ahead and take on the evil. Back then, we didn't know what the evil was other than the Bugster threat, but here we see that it's clearly Kronos. Now, in some other years, it's kind of interesting how in the last fight of the series, we'll see that they'll decide early on, well, we have to make this decision. Are we going to use the final forms in this fight, or are we going to use the base forms that people have become familiar with? In some cases, if it's written correctly, the final form makes more sense. In other cases, the base form makes more sense. Compared to last year's Ghost finale, that didn't make a lot of sense compared to everything they were doing, but here at Exade, it makes sense based off what they're talking about, specifically that Palad's sacrifice was enough to reduce Kronos to a weakened state. That way the level 2 forms could go ahead and take him out. And if there's something I have to give this credit for, it's absolutely the fact that Laser turned back into his level 2 form, the bike, meaning we got bike action, albeit CG, in this finale, and everything was done beautifully, decent enough choreography, we've dealt with Kronos, he has been defeated, Kamen Rider Chronicle is finished. Now, the interesting thing I want to point out here is that Masamune took this stance of take his ball and go home, in that he sacrifices himself to make sure that nobody else can get back the lives that were lost due to Kamen Rider Chronicle. Now, this is interesting compared to other finales that we've seen in Kamen Rider. When the finale happens, a lot of the time, it's a very decided victory. There's not a lot of loss. Maybe we've lost a rider here or there, but in this particular case, there's loss. There are people that they can't get back. There's something to be weighed upon heavily upon the hearts of all of the Kamen Riders who were fighting this far. Now, when you think of that compared to what we're about to find out in the rest of this episode, that makes sense because we still need that weight, because some people will feel a little bit cheated about the information we're about to get here in the end of the episode. Now, I do appreciate in this epilogue that Emu has stepped up as a doctor, that they're still trying to work towards curing game disease. I appreciate that the threat is still on the field, and it makes sense that the riders stay around. Again, in other finales, we see that the riders give up their powers in some circumstances. Here, that's not the case. We still need the CR doctors to perform their duties as Kamen Riders after the series has ended. Now, based on confirmation from Toei, a lot of this has to do with the fact that True Ending, the movie that we just saw released over in Japan for Exade, does have that weight holding on the series. Now, as far as wrapping up everything that happens over at the Genmu Corporation, seeing as we've lost basically 2, nay 3 CEOs over the course of the series, we see that, thankfully enough, Skudu, one of the nicer characters here in the series, has taken over the duties as acting CEO. It's nice to see that they remember that character, and they have a good person with a good heart in charge there. Who knows, maybe in an eventual spin-off, we'll see Bergman come back. The other interesting thing to see is the development of Saibaniko here in this last episode. We see that it's actually told to us that she's quite well off from all of her game winnings throughout decent tournament wins over the course of the series, and using that money, she's parlayed that into the stocks that actually saved Genmu Corporation from either going bankrupt or going out of business. Now, this is a very interesting thing to see here, because you imagine something that weighty would be given to a different character, but here, no, it's actually Saibaniko, a character you would have been initially annoyed with in the series, who saves the company, who saves everybody's gaming interests. Now, we're told that she has graduated high school here in the finale, and that she has all of this free time to devote to being with Taiga, to maybe perhaps go into a medical profession. take that however you will, it's interesting to see that we could potentially see her doing more philanthropic work there in the series or the eventual spin-offs. As we've been told, there are a trilogy of movies coming out next year in March and April to fill in some story gaps or maybe even further the narrative along. But of course, the biggest takeaway from all of this is the fact that we're told, based off last week's episode, which again I was very upset about, is that Paulad and Poppy were not sacrificed for nothing. In fact, they're absolutely fine. Their data was saved in both Kuroto Dan and Emu respectively, meaning they're both fine. They didn't sacrifice themselves for nothing, and really that can be taken one of two ways, and I'll go ahead and talk about that. As far as Paulad's concerned, yes, he had to be alive in some way, shape, or form, depending on your definition of alive for a Bugster, because Emu was able to transform and defeat Kronos. So you can take that as much as you want. As far as the narrative is concerned, is that a good thing, is that a bad thing? That's fine. But as far as Poppy's concerned, as a lot of you have responded to from last week's episode, people were really upset that we saw the sacrifice of a female writer, but it seems here, since she's not dead, the curse has been broken, at least for this series. The female writer lived through to the end. She has all of her capabilities. She can go on to be Kamen Rider Poppy, and as we've seen for advertisements already for this trilogy of movies, she will again don that suit, which I feel incredible about. We can see more of her in action, and that's basically where we are at the end of the series. Emu pledges to the people in the Tokyo metropolitan area, nay, people all across Japan, that the lives that were lost because of Kamen Rider Chronicle and because of Kuroto Dan breaking the Master Gashot for Kamen Rider Chronicle, that there might be a way, maybe not right now, but in 5 years, 10 years, we'll find a way to go ahead and get those lives back. Of course, this leaves the door open for all these spin-offs, for potential returns for all of these different characters and actors later on down the road. And this was it. This was the last episode. Kamen Rider Chronicle, that problem was solved. Everybody that we thought was dead, at least within the last episode, aren't dead. They're absolutely fine and can still transform into Kamen Riders. And this is it. We've reached the end. It's hard to go ahead and sum up how I feel about this series, given that based off the criteria of what the series was going to be about when it was revealed a year ago, I already had a personal tie to it. And now, having sat through it for the better part of a year, it's hard to let it go. You get like this when you first get into Kamen Rider, and your first series, if this is your first series watching Kamen Rider, the first will always stand out to you and will stick with you for a long time, and it's important to not be too biased by that. But I honestly believe that this is one of the better series that we've had in the Kamen Rider franchise. For something that sounded very simplistic, very kiddie a year ago, I'm here at the end, and I feel satisfied with the ending that we got. I appreciate the development of these characters from start to finish. I appreciate that the power-ups made sense. Overall, there wasn't a lot of filler, if at all, in this series, and that's saying something considering the filler that we've gotten in, say, Drive or Ghost in past years. So you might ask, would I recommend the series? Yes, I would. It might not be the best depiction of what a Kamen Rider is, but as far as an entertaining piece of media, I absolutely would recommend this to anybody watching. So if you have the opportunity, it's out there now, the whole thing is complete, there's more on the way in the form of that trilogy, definitely check out this series. But of course, those are my thoughts on the series. I want to hear what you guys thought, so let's keep it simple this time. 1, who was your favorite character? 2, what was your favorite moment? And 3, do you think you'll go on to watch Kamen Rider Build? And to be completely honest, yes, I will be back next week to talk about Kamen Rider Build in a new series. So yes, definitely hit me up in those comments, and of course you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been Exade Replay for the final episode of Kamen Rider Exade Endless Game. I'm Josh Knight the First. Thank you guys for watching.